إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I hereby declare open the 10th meeting of the 52nd session of the Working Group on the Universal Periodic Review. We shall now proceed with a review of Seychelles. Before we begin, please let me remind you that all delegations should upload their oral statements through the online events system for inscription on the list of speakers before the opening of the review they intend to address. In accordance with the Human Rights Council Resolution 5/1, the review is based on the national report and the compilation of UN information and the summary of stakeholders' information, both prepared by the OHCHR. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Celia Ardina Mangrou, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of the Republic of Seychelles to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, to introduce the delegation. Excellency, you have the floor.
President, esteemed members of the Human Rights Council, distinguished delegates of UN member states, representatives of civil society, observers, representatives of the Troika, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government of Seychelles, I extend our sincere gratitude for the constructive dialogue held during this review. We thank all delegations for their questions, recommendations. Apologies for that, Madam Vice President. Distinguished members of the Human Rights Council, observer states, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Republic of Seychelles, I reaffirm our strong support for the Universal Periodic Review. We regard the UPR as a vital mechanism for peer dialogue, mutual learning, and the sharing of good practices, while recognizing the importance of national circumstances in advancing human rights. We approach this review with this deep responsibility and a strong commitment to advancing human rights in Seychelles. As a small island developing state, we remain steadfast in our dedication to upholding the values of inclusivity, dignity, and equality for all our people. We deeply value the opportunity this platform provides for open and constructive dialogue with fellow states as we collectively work to strengthen the human rights framework, both in Seychelles and globally. Madam Vice President, it is an honor to introduce the Seychelles delegation participating in this important session. Our delegation is led by Honorable Barry Faure, Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Diaspora. The delegation also includes Ms. Melissa Stravens and Ms. Sarah Bonte from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Diaspora, Ms. Shirley Adrien from the Ministry of Social Affairs, Family and Equality, Ms. Danielle Kodzer from the Judiciary, Ms. Emily Lucas from the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Seychelles in Geneva, and respective members of other relevant ministries, as well as the Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee joining remotely from the Seychelles. I would like now to give the floor to our head of our delegation, Ambassador Barry Faure, Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Diaspora, who will present Seychelles' national report and share progress and ongoing efforts to advance human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Celia Mangru. Madam Vice President, esteemed members of the Human Rights Council, distinguished delegates of UN member states, representatives of the Troika, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I wish to convey the warm greetings of the government and people of the Republic of Seychelles to all distinguished delegations present. My delegation is honored to present Seychelles' national report at this 52nd session of the Working Group on the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council. As the ambassador has introduced us, this fourth cycle engagement with the UPR working groups is testament to Seychelles' commitment to constructive engagement and cooperation within this peer review mechanism since its establishment. I wish to express our sincere appreciation to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for its continued support in the preparation of this review, including through capacity building initiatives and through the Voluntary Fund, which supported the participation of one of the delegates. We would also like to thank other international organizations, such as the Commonwealth Small States Office, for their determined effort for Seychelles' preparation of this review. We extend our gratitude to the members of the Troika for their facilitation of this process. I take the opportunity to also thank all states that have submitted questions in advance. We'll be addressing during this presentation their questions. Madam Vice President, Seychelles, being a small island developing state comprised of 115 islands and a population of approximately 120,000 people, despite its size and unique geographic realities, Seychelles has built a society grounded in a strong and enduring commitment to human rights, equality, and non-discrimination. This commitment is enshrined in the Constitution of Seychelles, which serves as the cornerstone of the country's legal framework for the protection and promotion of human rights. It is significant to note that the Seychelles Charter on Fundamental Rights and Freedoms reflects the enduring principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and aligns firmly with the core international human rights treaties, all of which Seychelles is a party. Seychelles remains firmly committed to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals through the implementation of its National Development Strategy 2024-2028 and Vision 2033. These frameworks closely align national priorities with the 2030 Agenda, advancing inclusive growth, good governance, human rights, environmental sustainability, and resilience to ensure that no one is left behind. Since our last review, Seychelles has continued to make steady and measurable progress and has undertaken a number of important initiatives and reforms in advancing the promotion and protection of human rights, some of which I will now highlight. On the issue of reporting obligations, allow me to acknowledge the challenges we face regarding the backlog in treaty body reporting, largely due to limited institutional capacity and human resources. As a small island development state, these constraints are further amplified by limited financial resources, competing national priorities, and coordination across agencies. We remain mindful of that status quo in respect to our outstanding reports to certain respective treaty bodies. Seychelles is determined to further strengthen its human rights framework and have taken steps to strengthen reporting framework through the establishment of the Seychelles Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee. This committee is mandated to oversee the preparation and submission of human rights reports to international and regional mechanisms, thereby supporting the fulfillment of our obligations. I am pleased to inform that work, Work through the committee is actively underway at the national level to finalize some outstanding reports, and by the end of 2026, we aim to finalize the initial country report under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. On the issue of national human rights institutions, the Seychelles Human Rights Commission is the national human rights institution of the country with a broad mandate to promote and protect the human rights of all persons in Seychelles. The Commission is currently undergoing legislative review to align its functions to the Paris Principles. The government remains firmly committed to strengthening and supporting the Commission in the effective discharge of its mandate. Similarly, the Office of the Ombudsman also operates as an independent body and is now reinforced through recent institutional reforms that have enhanced its contribution to accountability, transparency, and good governance. The government firmly supports all efforts to strengthen its capacity and operational effectiveness with the ultimate goal of protecting the rights of any aggrieved person with integrity. On the issue of administration of justice, Seychelles respects the rule of law and continues to improve the administration of justice by strengthening the role of the judiciary whilst maintaining judicial independence. As reflected in the national report, and in line with previous recommendations received, the judiciary has implemented several measures to enhance impartiality, promote equality, and improve on access to justice. These measures include better access for women and girls in relation to assault cases, enhanced support for vulnerable citizens through a fast-track system, and the drafting of a legal aid bill, together with a legal aid manual and accompanying regulations. On the issue of the rights of children, Seychelles stands firmly committed to their protection and recognizes that every child deserves dignity, safety, and opportunity. In alignment with fundamental human rights principles, the government ensures access to free quality education, healthcare, and ensures that there are firm mechanisms to protect them from exploitation and abuse. Seychelles has strengthened its child protection and family justice framework through the enactment of the Children Amendment Act 2005. The Act enhances enforcement of child maintenance orders, strengthens the family tribunal, introduces mediation where it is in the best interests of the child, and increases penalties for non-compliance with tribunal orders. In addition, the government enacted a new regulation which establishes mandatory procedures for individuals engaged in child-related services in Seychelles, including background checks to ensure their suitability. On the issue of gender equality, Seychelles has made significant progress in advancing gender equality in line with international goals, such as SDG 5, through strengthened institutions, improved data systems, and inclusive policies that promote women's participation in education, leadership, and key sectors. Women enjoy equal rights with men and are increasingly taking on key leadership roles across all sectors. Also, the delegates here are women. We are pleased to note that for the first time in our history, a woman serves as the Speaker of the National Assembly and is supported by a woman-led secretariat. By 2024, women made up 52% of all judges, another significant milestone in gender representation. Women also occupy some of the country's highest decision-making bodies, including a majority of women in the Seychelles Cabinet of Ministers and a woman as the governor of the central bank, further underscoring the Seychelles commitment to promoting advancing gender equality and women's participation in leadership roles. On the issue of gender-based violence, Madam Vice President, important progress has been made in addressing gender-based violence, such as the establishment of a domestic violence technical committee to support implementation of the Domestic Violence Act and develop key coordination and shelter management tools. The Act aligns with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and seeks to strengthen protections for victims of domestic violence, particularly by facilitating the issuance of protection orders to enhance their safety. While services have been assessed and gaps identified, the establishment of a dedicated shelter remains a priority. The family policy is also being finalized to enhance coordinated support for families alongside capacity building initiatives on gender-based violence and trauma-informed care. In addition, a GBV database has been created within its relevant ministry to improve data collection. On the issue of trafficking in persons and the rights of migrant workers, Seychelles recognizes the vulnerabilities faced by migrant workers and the cross-cutting nature of trafficking in persons and adopts a comprehensive rights-based approach to this matter. Seychelles has taken steps to strengthen its legal framework in combating trafficking in persons, such as the amendment of the Penal Code to increase the minimum sentence for related offenses and introducing harsher penalties when children are involved, particularly in cases of sexual exploitation. Our efforts include a strengthened approach to labor monitoring, improved recruitment practices, and measures to prevent exploitation of migrant workers. Seychelles is further addressing remaining gaps through the use of technology such as video link testimony and the drafting of new laws such as the Migrant Smuggling Bill to strengthen the legal framework further. Seychelles also continues to strengthen foreign bilateral and multilateral cooperation to promote fair recruitment practices, improve labor standards, and prevent exploitation and trafficking, guided by international norms and best practices. We value our relationship with our international partners, such as the IOM and UNODC, which have assisted in building institutional capacity, as well as improving coordination between concerned stakeholders. On the issue of rights of persons living with disabilities, Madam Vice President, Seychelles places strong emphasis on and is firmly committed to the protection and promotion of the rights of persons living with disabilities, as demonstrated through the provision of tax exemptions on medical equipment to improve accessibility and quality of life, the establishment of robust safeguards to uphold mental health rights, and enhancing coordination across government to improve access to essential services. In the recent elections, Seychelles introduced braille tactile voting folders for the first time, enabling persons with visual impairments to vote independently and with dignity. In addition, measures to improve accessibility, including designated parking and the incorporation of ramps in public infrastructure, are ongoing, while the government acknowledges remaining challenges and is actively pursuing solutions through initiatives such as the National Accessibility and Action Plan. Excuse me. Efforts to enhance inclusion are further reflected in early childhood and childcare regulations, as well as in the vocational training and rehabilitation program introduced in 2022 to support youth and with disabilities in accessing employment and integrating into society. On the issue of the rights of the elderly, Seychelles has also significantly strengthened its social protection framework in alignment with the rights of the elderly. Sorry. Recent legislative and policy reforms include the reduction of the retirement age from 65 to 63 under the Social Security Act and associated regulations, as well as an increase in monthly pensions to enhance income security for older persons. The Seychelles Home Care Agency continues to improve the quality, accessibility, and sustainability of home care services for older persons, persons with disabilities, and individuals requiring daily support. The government is advancing key policy and legal reforms, such as the National Accessibility Policy, aimed at improving the lives and elderly participation in our society. On the issue of the rights of the sentenced persons, Madam Vice President, Seychelles remains committed to a correctional system that balances security with rehabilitation, reintegration, and respect for human rights in line with international standards. Significant steps have been taken to strengthen and modernize correctional services. This includes the construction of a high-security facility designed in line with the Nelson Mandela rules. A low-risk rehabilitation facility is also under development to support classification-based management and reduce institutional tensions while enhancing rehabilitation outcomes. The government continues to explore and expand alternatives to incarceration, including work programs, electronic monitoring, and structured reintegration initiatives such as the Phoenix Program, a rehabilitation initiative designed to support inmates in reintegrating into society. In recognition of the vulnerability of young offenders, the government has established a dedicated youth offender facility and aims to ensure continuity of learning during detention. The healthcare and rehabilitation services within detention facilities have been further strengthened. Inmates have access to essential medical care, including opioid substitution therapy and treatment for sexually transmitted infections. On the issue of sexual orientation and gender identity, Madam Vice President, Seychelles reaffirms its commitment to equality and non-discrimination for all. The Constitution guarantees equal protection of the law and access to remedies for all individuals. Legislative development, including amendments to the Civil Code, have strengthened equality in areas of qualifying relationships such as cohabitation and matters relating to inheritance. In addition, to prevent acts amounting to hate-based crimes, the Penal Code Amendment Act 2024 represents a significant step in addressing acts motivated by prejudice and protecting vulnerable groups, including the LGBTIQ+ community. On the issue of the right to education, Madam Vice President, the right to education is of utmost to the significance government of Seychelles as it forms the foundation for individual empowerment and national development. Deliberate and sustained measures to strengthen the education system, including the upskilling and expansion of the teaching workforce, continue to be undertaken. Efforts are ongoing to increase the number of qualified teachers and strengthen learning environments through continuous professional development and improved educational resources, such as providing specialized education. Curriculum and policy reforms are also being advanced to equip learners with future-ready skills, with a strong emphasis on inclusive education. This includes the successful transition of learners from special schools to mainstream education, including students with visual impairment and autism spectrum disorder. In addition, most schools are now supported by special education needs coordinators, ensuring tailored support for learners with diverse educational needs and enabling their full participation in the school system. On the issue of the right to health, Seychelles is firmly committed to protecting the health and well-being of its population, as access to healthcare is a fundamental right of every individual and is enshrined in our Constitution. Healthcare is provided free of charge and is available to all throughout the country. Accessibility and quality of care are being enhanced through inclusive infrastructure design and specialized training for healthcare workers. Seychelles remains committed to strengthening healthcare in the country, which can be exemplified through these following initiatives. Healthcare infrastructure has been strengthened through the establishment of new hospitals and clinics, improved diagnostic services, and expanded screening and treatment for non-communicable diseases, cancer, and kidney disease. Targeted vaccination campaigns are also being implemented to safeguard public health and ensure coverage for all groups. Sexual and reproductive health services are widely accessible, supported by youth-friendly services and targeted interventions for vulnerable groups. The national response to HIV, STIs, hepatitis, and TB have been reinforced through an integrated program approach within the Ministry of Health, while health and sex education is delivered in schools and public awareness campaigns to promote prevention and informed health decisions. On the issue of environment and climate change, Madam Vice President, For Seychelles, environmental protection is not an abstract concept. It is a strong commitment and an existential priority. As a small island development state, our size and geography make us uniquely vulnerable to the diverse impacts of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. This reality underscores the urgent need for sustained measures to protect our islands and safeguard them for future generations. Seychelles has demonstrated consistent leadership in global environmental governance as a party to key multilateral agreements, including the Paris Agreement, and being the first African country to ratify the High Seas Treaty. At the national level, Seychelles has played through climate smart agriculture, strengthening food security and improving waste management systems to reduce pollution and safeguard public health. At the same time, sustained investments have ensured broad access to safe water and sanitation across the country. Madam Vice President, while Seychelles has made significant progress in advancing human rights, we acknowledge the challenges remain. As a small island development state, Seychelles continues to face a range of structural and external challenges, including the adverse impacts of climate change, limited human and financial resources, and evolving global uncertainty. Of our institutions and the people of Seychelles. It reinforced our determination to uphold and strengthen our human rights obligations, even in times of crisis. While challenges remain, Seychelles stands firmly committed to strengthening national institutions, enhancing coordination and partnerships, and building resilient systems to ensure the effective and sustainable implementation of our human rights commitments. Madam Vice President, we have presented Seychelles' Human Rights Report and welcome this opportunity to engage with other states in the spirit of constructive dialogue to receive recommendations and share best practices aimed at further strengthening the protection and promotion of human rights. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank His Excellency for this statement outlining the progress made since the last review. We shall now begin our interactive dialogue. Before giving the floor to delegations for their questions and comments, I would like to remind you that the speaking time will be 1 minute and 30 seconds for all. I wish to reiterate that issues of political, bilateral, or territorial nature should be kept out of our deliberations. Moreover, United Nations terminology should be used when referring to states and territories. Please be reminded that only the use of words recommend or recommendation will ensure that the relevant parts of your statements are included in the recommendations section of the working group report. Also, allow me to recall that the Human Rights Council strongly rejects any act of intimidation or reprisal against individuals and groups who cooperate or have cooperated with the United Nations and its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. We will now begin with a list of speakers, and the first country on my list is Mozambique. Please, you have the floor.
Welcomes the delegation from Seychelles and congratulates it on the presentation of its national reports within the framework of the fourth cycle and for undertaking a review of human rights legislation, as well as enacting new laws to strengthen its commitments to the promotion and protection of human rights. In a spirit of extensive engagement, Mozambique makes the following recommendation. 1, continue to promote the participation of women in political life, especially the inclusion in key decision-making bodies. And 2, enhance protection for children against maltreatment, especially sexual abuse. Mozambique, with Seychelles, have success in this review process. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President.
I thank you. Next, I give the floor to Namibia.
Vice President, Namibia warmly welcome the esteemed delegation of our sister Republic of Seychelles and thanks them for presenting their national report. We commend Seychelles for undertaking legal reform in strengthening its commitment to the promotions and protections of human rights. In the constructive spirit, Namibia offers 3 recommendations. 1, continue taking measures to ensure access to climate-resilient housing and infrastructure for vulnerable communities. 2, consider developing a national policy guaranteeing rights and inclusions of persons with disability. And then 3, consider ratifying the optional protocol on conventions on the rights of persons with disability. We wish Seychelles a productive review. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Nepal.
Madam Vice President, Nepal welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Seychelles to the 4th cycle of UPR and thanks them for the presentation of National Report. We appreciate Seychelles for its constructive engagement in the international human rights mechanisms and its efforts to implement the recommendations of last UPR. The ratification of international human rights instruments, including the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Child on a communications procedure, is praiseworthy. We take positive notes of the steps undertaken by Seychelles in poverty reduction, jobs creation, and human development. In a constructive spirit, Nepal recommends Seychelles the following. 1, scale up its efforts to prevent the acts of trafficking in persons and promote equality and non-discrimination in the labor market. 2, step up measures to expand social protection coverage in both formal and informal sectors. We wish Seychelles a successful UPR. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Kingdom of the Netherlands thanks the delegation of Seychelles for the presentation of its national report. The Netherlands commends the Seychelles government for the recent steps it has taken to advance the implementation of the recommendations of the Truth, Reconciliation and National Unity Commission. The Netherlands notes that further steps could be taken to improve civic space in Seychelles, most notably where it concerns the right to peaceful assembly. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, the Netherlands recommends 1, to continue the implementation of the recommendations made by the Truth, Reconciliation and National Unity Commission. 2, to remove restrictions to civic space in legislation, for example, in the 2015 Public Gatherings Act and the 2022 Associations Act. The Netherlands wishes Seychelles success with the follow-up of all recommendations it receives during this UPR cycle. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to New Zealand.
Madam Vice President, we warmly welcome the delegation from the Seychelles. We welcome the work of the Seychelles government to strengthen civil and political rights, national governance mechanisms, and legal frameworks to address gender-based violence. We particularly acknowledge the measures taken through the Domestic Violence Act 2020 and the 2022 Gender-Based Violence Action Plan. New Zealand recommends that Seychelles, 1, strengthen protections against gender-based violence by expediting the comprehensive implementation of the Domestic Violence Act. Ensure women and girls have full and confidential access to modern forms of contraceptives. And 3, fully align legal frameworks relating to persons with disabilities with the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We thank the delegation for their participation today and wish them a successful review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. My delegation thanks the distinguished delegation of Seychelles for its national report and constructive engagement in the UPR process. We commend Seychelles for the important legislative reforms undertaken during the review period, particularly on the rights of women, children, and people with disabilities. We also recognize its ambitious climate action agenda, geared at enhancing the adaptive capacity and resilience of its communities from the adverse effects of climate change. To build on these gains, my delegation offers the following recommendations. 1, continue to strengthen the protection mechanisms for migrant workers, particularly against forced labor, by strengthening labor inspections, promoting fair and ethical recruitment practices, and ensuring access to remedy. 2, further intensify efforts to prevent and combat trafficking in persons through improved victim identification and referral systems, interagency coordination, and training for investigators and prosecutors. And 3, strengthen the independence of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission by addressing financial and institutional constraints. The Philippines wishes Seychelles all success in this review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Portugal.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Portugal thanks the delegation of Seychelles for the presentation of its national report. Portugal welcomes Seychelles' continued efforts to enhance the human rights situations in the country, including by addressing social challenges through strengthened policies and legal frameworks, notably the development of a Disabilities Rights Bill and amendments to the Civil Status Act and the Civil Code 2020, which abolished marriage for children under the age of 18. Portugal also welcomes the establishment of the National Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee and its contribution to addressing overdue reporting obligations and strengthening national accountability in relation to Seychelles' commitments under international human rights reporting mechanisms. In a constructive spirit, Portugal recommends that Seychelles considers ratifying the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Portugal wishes Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We're grateful to the delegation of Seychelles for presenting the national report. Seychelles government's work to rectify the human rights situation in the country, including in harmonizing international legislation with international standards, merits support. We welcome the creation and launch of a human rights mission in the Seychelles, as well as ratification of the optional protocol to the CRC concerning communications procedure. However, among major problems, we note the practice of violation of the rights of hired workers, particularly foreign workers, a lack of measures to combat human trafficking and prevent the practice of forced labor, cruel treatment by the police, as also protracted pre-trial detention of arrested persons. We recommend 1, adopt effective measures to counteract human trafficking and prevent the practice of forced labor. 2, intensify efforts to prevent cases of cruel treatment by the police. And 3, speed up work on a draft law to combat crimes against children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Rwanda.
Madam Vice President, Rwanda welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Seychelles and thanks them for presentation of the national report. We commend the significant progress made in promotion and protection of human rights since the last review, including the ratification of key international instruments such as optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Child on a communication procedure, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and the International Convention on the Control of Harmful Anti-Fueling System on Ships, among others. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Rwanda recommends to Seychelles the following. 1. Consider ratifying the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Second, continue strengthening the implementation of legal and policy framework on gender-based violence. Third, establish a transparent and accountable framework for digital platform governance to safeguard human rights and address harmful online content. Rwanda wishes Seychelles a successful review. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Samoa.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Samoa warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles, led by Honorable Minister Barry Faure, and thanks them for their informative presentation on efforts to promote and protect human rights at the national level. We commend recent legislative reforms, including the Constitutional Amendment 2025, which enables citizens turning 18 in an election year to register and vote, strengthening youth participation. We also note amendments to the Courts Act, introducing Section 49A to ensure procedural assistance for persons with disabilities, including sign language interpretation, braille technology, and other support. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Samoa offers the following recommendations to Seychelles. 1. Ensure the independence of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles, with adequate human, technical, and financial resources. 2. Strengthen the independence and effectiveness of the Seychelles Media Commission by aligning the nomination line with SDGs 4.7 and 16. We wish Seychelles a very successful review. I thank you.
There was a problem with the microphone. Thank you very much for your statement. There was a problem with microphone. Can you please repeat the part of the recommendations again? Can you read them once
okay.
more? Yes, please.
Thank you again, Madam Vice President. First, ensure the independence of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles, with adequate human, technical, and financial resources. Secondly, strengthen the independence and effectiveness of the Seychelles Media Commission by aligning the nomination process with international standards. And lastly, enhance child protection through preventive awareness raising and education in line with SDGs 4.7 and 16. I hope that has been captured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I give the floor to Senegal.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Senegal welcomes the delegation of the Republic of the Seychelles and thanks it for the submission of the report, which highlights the progress achieved in implementation of the recommendations from the previous cycle. Senegal hails the commitment of the government of the Seychelles to promote and protect human rights, particularly by strengthening the legislative and institutional framework, as well as measures aiming at improving living conditions of the population. In a constructive spirit of dialogue, Senegal would make the following 2 recommendations. 1, continue with the process of implementing recommendations seeking to ensure the independence and financial autonomy of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission. 2, continue to harmonize national legislation with the provisions of the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child regarding the individual communications procedure. In conclusion, Senegal wishes every success to the Republic of the Seychelles and its people in implementing the accepted recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Sierra Leone.
Vice President Sierra Leone warmly welcomes His Excellency Minister Foy and the delegation from Seychelles. We commend Seychelles for introducing braille tactile folders for the 2025 elections, which is an important step towards ensuring that people with visual impairments can participate in elections. We also commend Seychelles for strengthening its teaching workforce through Education Regulation 2021, which promotes professional standards and maintains an updated national teaching registry. We further commend Seychelles for the significant progress towards achieving SDG 4, as evidenced by its high literacy rates and substantial budget allocations to the education sector. To this end, we offer the following recommendation. 1, consider amending its legislation to guarantee at least 1 year of free pre-primary education. And 2, strengthen environmental and climate action by aligning national policies with international agreements and enhancing measures to protect biodiversity, reduce pollution, and promote sustainable resource management. Sierra Leone extends its best wishes to the sisterly Republic of Seychelles for this review. Thank you, Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Singapore.
Madam Vice President, Singapore welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Seychelles, a fellow SIDS, to the 4th cycle of the UPR process. We take note of the commendable progress it has made since its last review, including improving life expectancy and maternal and child health, as well as efforts in promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, Singapore recommends the following. First, continue efforts to conduct legislative and policy reforms to strengthen the protection of the rights of children. Second, strengthen efforts to improve barrier-free access in public spaces, housing, and transport systems. Third, continue developing comprehensive policies to support active and healthy aging. We wish Seychelles every success in its review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Slovenia welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. We further welcome the establishment of the Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee and of the National Mechanism for Implementation, Reporting and Follow-up. We encourage Seychelles to provide these bodies with sustained resources so as to address the remaining backlog of overdue reports to the treaty bodies. In a spirit of constructive cooperation, Slovenia recommends that Seychelles ensure the full independence of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission, including by guaranteeing its financial and administrative autonomy and allocating adequate human, technical, and financial resources in line with the Paris principles. We wish Seychelles every success in this review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to South Africa.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. South Africa commends the distinguished delegation of the Seychelles to this UPR session. My delegation commends Seychelles for, over the past 5 years, ensuring the ratification of all 9 core human rights treaties and the establishment of the Human Rights Institution in line with the Paris principles. South Africa wishes to respectfully recommend that Seychelles consider the following: and forced labor and strengthen efforts to ensure labor inspections in the Seychelles International Trade Zone and other inspected areas, such as the island of Praslin and La Digue. Secondly, deal with the prevalence of drug use disorders and enhance capacities and the means to cover the different programs and install and maintain a residential rehabilitation facility. Third, undertake research on the causes of students drop out of schools and to develop durable solutions, including the introduction of more motivating school curricula. Fourth, integrate climate adaptation into national development planning to protect the rights to housing, health, water, security, and livelihoods, and establish national coordination mechanism to ensure inclusive and accountable climate governance. My delegation wishes Seychelles a successful review, and I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to South Sudan.
Madam Vice President, South Sudan warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles, headed by His Excellency Minister for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora. We commend Seychelles for being one of the few African countries that have ratified all 9 core human rights treaties and for continuing to align with international gender equality commitment, as well as for being rated highly in good governance, human development, and in maternal health care indexes. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, South Sudan recommend: 1, consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. 2, recognize the right to education for all migrant workers and their families on an equal standing with that of nationals, both in law and in practice. 3, implement temporary measures to accelerate women's participation in leadership in political and public life, particularly in the cabinet, the National Assembly, and local government. 4, review and align its legal framework with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and develop a national policy to guarantee the rights and inclusion of and accessibility for persons with disabilities. We wish Seychelles a successful UPR review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Spain.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Vice President. Minister, Spain welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks them for their participation in this review. We commend important progress in protection and promotion of human rights in the country, including the concern regarding climate change and efforts to guarantee access to water and sanitation. Spain recommends that Seychelles 1, strengthen measures to prevent and punish gender-based violence and sexual harassment, including the creation of specialized protocols for victim care. 2, adopt a comprehensive law against discrimination, including an express reference to sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability, thereby ensuring effective protection from all forms of discrimination. 3, establish specific protection mechanisms for human rights defenders, strengthening institutional resources and understanding and knowledge regarding international protection mechanisms. 4, adopt a comprehensive law on disability aligned with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, including a human rights-based approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Sri Lanka welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and appreciates the presentation of its national report to the 4th UPR review cycle. We appreciate the progressive steps taken by Seychelles in enhancing legislative and institutional framework to protect and promote human rights of its people since its last UPR review. We appreciate the fact that Seychelles has ratified all 9 core human rights treaties and its constructive engagement with the regular human rights mechanisms. In a constructive spirit, Sri Lanka recommends Seychelles to further strengthen the measures to address the issues related to forced labor while improving support mechanisms for victims of exploitation and to ensure labor inspections in the Seychelles International Trade Zone and other under-inspected areas such as the islands of Praslin and Lardig. To introduce policies on adolescent, sexual and reproductive health and address the issue of teenage pregnancy while improving access to family planning and sexual and reproductive health. To introduce policies to protect the environment, forest, and introduce solid measures to waste management to ensure sustainable ecosystems and public health. To strengthen the efforts to address violence against women and girls, including technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Sri Lanka wishes Seychelles success in its UPR engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Thailand.
Vice President, Thailand commends Seychelles for the adoption of Domestic Violence Act 2020, which represents a significant step towards enhanced protection of survivors of gender-based violence, and for its recent National Action Plan on Trafficking in Persons, which reflects a structured commitment to combating trafficking. Thailand recommends that Seychelles, 1, expedite ongoing efforts to ensure the financial and administrative autonomy of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles to safeguard its independence and support an A status accreditation. 2, take further steps to operationalize the Domestic Violence Act, including through establishing specialized services for survivors and strengthening capacity building for law enforcement and justice personnel. And 3, allocate adequate resources to the Seychelles Prison Service to improve the conditions of detention facilities in line with the Mandela Rules and the Bangkok Rules. We wish Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Togo.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Togo welcomes the delegation from Seychelles and takes note of the report. Togo welcomes efforts undertaken by Seychelles to implement the recommendations from the third cycle of DPR, particularly those on strengthening the legal framework and protection of categories of rights. However, in a constructive spirit, Togo would like to make the following recommendations to Togo. 1, to ratify the 1954 Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons. 2, take the suitable legislative and regulatory measures to support the right to asylum and for refugee protection. 3, strengthen mechanisms to combat human trafficking. Togo wishes the Republic of Seychelles every success in implementing the recommendations from this UPR cycle. Thank you.
Merci. Next, I give the floor to Tunisia.
شكرا السيدة نائب الرئيس. يرحب
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. We would like to welcome the delegation from Seychelles and commend them on their collaboration with the UPR and mechanisms. We congratulate them on efforts undertaken to draft the report and on the improvement in legislative human rights frameworks. Our recommendations are: 1, address legal gaps and build capacity to combat human trafficking. 2, incorporate a gender-specific vision into public administration and improve women's leadership positions. 3, put an end to domestic violence and support victims thereof. 4, continue with reforms of the education sector and improve school curricula and education policies by ensuring inclusive education for all at all levels. We wish Seychelles every success this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Turkey.
Madam Vice President, we welcome the delegation of Seychelles and thank them for their presentation. We congratulate the government and the people of Seychelles on the peaceful transition of power following the presidential and parliamentary election held in 2025, which were deemed fair, credible, and impartial by all observers. We welcome the efforts of the Seychelles Human Rights Commission and its 5-year strategic plan, which aims to establish an institutional basis for improving human rights. We note with appreciation the structural changes made to the Office of the Ombudsman to advance accountability, transparency, and the good governance. Turkey commends the legislative and policy reforms undertaken by Seychelles to strengthen the protection and the rights of children. In a constructive dialogue, Turkey recommends Seychelles to finalize the review of its Prohibition of Trafficking Person Act, which will strengthen the victim protection and enhance the existing legal framework. We wish Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ukraine welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. We take note of the steps taken to advance human rights protection since the previous cycle. We also recognize efforts to enhance institutional frameworks and promote equality and support for vulnerable groups. At the same time, we note that a number of the challenges remain and require further attention. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ukraine would like to recommend the Seychelles strengthen the independence and capacity of Seychelles Human Rights Commission in line with Paris principles, hence efforts to combat trafficking in persons and labor exploitation, including through stronger inspection and victim protection mechanisms, ensure equal access to social services, including healthcare and education for all, in particular for migrant workers and vulnerable groups. We wish Seychelles every success in its review and in the continued implementation of its human rights commitments. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The United Kingdom welcomes the free and fair elections held in Seychelles in October 2025. But we have concerns around prolonged pretrial detention and expanded security powers, despite otherwise strong democratic institutions. The UK welcomes the activities of the Seychelles National Human Rights Commission since the last UPR, including its annual reports in 2024 and 2025. We continue to urge the government to ensure that the Commission is adequately financed and resourced. We also commend the government for its continued constructive engagement with UN treaty bodies, including the review by the Committee on Migrant Workers in 2024. We recommend that Seychelles, 1, conduct an independent investigation on the 5th of December 2024 prison riots, with demonstrable steps taken to hold perpetrators to account. 2, publish a clear legal and policy frameworks governing the protection of refugees and migrants, including procedures for identification, access to basic services, and safeguards against arbitrary detention, and report publicly on steps taken to bring national practice into line with international human rights standards. And 3, establish a transparent and time-bound mechanism for monitoring, responding to, and implementing recommendations made by the National Human Rights Commission, including public reporting on progress and outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to United Republic of Tanzania.
Madam President, the United Republic of Tanzania warmly welcomes the Republic of Seychelles to this 22nd Universal Periodic Review session. We commend Seychelles' strong and inclusive engagement of multiple stakeholders in the preparation of its fourth cycle UPR report and encourage continued effort to strengthen collaboration with civil society in the implementation of UPR recommendations. We also commend Seychelles for ratifying regional and international instruments, including the SADC Protocol against corruption, and recommend further measures to strengthen effort to prevent and combat corruption in public sector. We acknowledge the measures taken by Seychelles to strengthen institutions, enhance data systems, and develop inclusive policy to advance Sustainable Development Goal number 5, and encourage continued effort to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, particularly in science and technology. We wish the Republic of Seychelles a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Uruguay.
Señora Vice.
Madam Vice President, Uruguay welcomes the delegation of the Seychelles and we thank them for the presentation of the report. We commend efforts made to implement the recommendations from the previous cycle, especially progress in ratifying the fundamental human rights treaties and ILO conventions. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, continue advancing in ratification of the main international human rights instruments that the country is not yet a party to, and guarantee their integration into national legislation of their obligations pursuant to the ratified human rights treaties. 2, guarantee the independence of the Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles and assign it sufficient human, technical and financial resources. 3, adopt comprehensive legislation to criminalize all forms of violence against women, including domestic rape and gender-based violence facilitated by technology. Finally, strengthen data and record systems through the institutionalization of routine collection of administrative data on GBV, disaggregated by age, disability, location, and relation to the perpetrator. Uruguay wishes Seychelles success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Vanuatu.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Vanuatu warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and commends its continued commitment to the Universal Periodic Review process. We acknowledge the progress made since the last review, particularly in advancing social protection, promoting gender equality, and strengthening environmental stewardship, issues that are deeply important to small island developing states like our own. At the same time, we recognize that challenges remain. In the spirit of constructive dialogue and cooperation, Vanuatu offers the following recommendations. First, continue strengthening measures to address gender-based violence, including ensuring adequate resources for prevention, victim support, and access to justice. Second, we recommend further efforts to enhance the independence and capacity of national human rights institutions in line with the Paris Principle to ensure effective monitoring and protection of human rights. Third, expand initiatives that address the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities, including integrating human rights-based approaches into climate adaptation and disaster reduction strategies. Fourth, we recommend continued attention to the rights of persons in vulnerable situations, including persons with disabilities, and migrant workers, ensuring their full inclusion and protection under the law. We wish the delegation every success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Venezuela.
Gracias. Thank you, Vice President. We'd like to wish a warm welcome to the delegation of the Seychelles, and we thank them for their presentation. We appreciate the major progress achieved, such as ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention on Rights of the Child, the adoption of the law on the criminal code that criminalizes hate speech and prejudice-motivated crimes, as well as the introduction of voting in Braille to guarantee electoral inclusion for persons with disabilities. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, strengthen the Human Rights Commission, giving it sufficient human, technical, and financial resources to ensure its full independence and its accreditation in step with the Paris Principles, and also effectively supervise places of detention. 2, redouble efforts to combat human trafficking and workplace exploitation, labor exploitation, particularly in the international trade zone and in the sectors of fisheries and construction, prohibiting confiscation of passports, harmonizing labor conditions of migrant workers with those of nationals, and guaranteeing periodic inspections. And 3, adopt comprehensive measures to prevent and sanction domestic and gender-based violence by creating accessible emergency shelters, systematic collection of disaggregated data, and on-the-job training for police officers and justice operators. We wish Seychelles success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Vietnam.
Madam Vice President, Vietnam warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the presentation of this national report. We commend Seychelles' continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, including through legislative and institutional reforms, efforts to strengthen child protection, inclusive education, and address the impact of climate change as a small island developing state. In a constructive spirit, Vietnam offers the following 2 recommendations. First, continue to strengthen child protection system through expanded specialized services and capacity building for professionals working with children. Second, further its efforts to advance climate resilient and inclusive development through stronger environmental protection measures and support for vulnerable communities. Vietnam wishes Seychelles continued success in its UPR process. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Zimbabwe.
Vice President, Zimbabwe welcomes the delegation of Seychelles to the review. We commend Seychelles for the continual development of its legislation to safeguard the rights of its citizens, as well as for ratifying and acceding to international instruments during the period under review. In the spirit of dialogue, Zimbabwe recommends the following. 1, to strengthen legal institutions and develop inclusive policies that advance the rights of women and disadvantaged groups, including girls and persons with disabilities. 2, to continue with the implementation of the National Health Strategic Plan and ensure accessibility to healthcare by vulnerable communities. And 3, to strengthen its climate change resilience strategy to ensure sustainable development. We wish Seychelles a successful review. I thank you.
I thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation to address observations and comments that have been raised so far. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Vice President, the delegation will take the opportunity to address the advanced questions that we have received. Various members of the delegation will focus on specific thematic areas. On the issue of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, this is a priority for the government of the Republic of Seychelles, particularly as a small island developing state, highly vulnerable to climate change and environmental degradation. At the international and regional level, Seychelles continues to demonstrate strong leadership and commitment. It is a party to key environmental conventions, including the Paris Agreement and the Convention on Biological Diversity, and has actively participated in global processes, such as negotiations on the Global Plastics Treaty. In 2024, Seychelles became the first African state to ratify the High Seas Treaty, reinforcing its commitment to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity. Seychelles also continues to implement obligations under the Montreal Protocol and CITES through national legislation. The Trade in Wild Fauna and Flora Act 2021 regulates and protects endangered species, while environmental regulations, such as the prohibition of latex balloons, aim to reduce pollution and protect ecosystems. The National Development Strategy 2024-2020 government contributions. Seychelles is advancing renewable energy through its integrated resource plan and has developed climate finance and disaster risk financing strategies to strengthen resilience. The country has also accessed international climate financing mechanisms while continuing to advocate for fair access to concessional finance despite structural vulnerabilities. Seychelles has designated over 30% of its marine territory as protected areas, achieving global conservation targets ahead of schedule. The country is promoting climate-smart agriculture, including hydroponics and agroecology, supported by partnerships with international organizations. In relation to waste management and non-toxic environments, efforts are ongoing to improve waste collection and management systems, reduce pollution, and enhance environmental health, including through the work of the Landscape and Waste Management Agency. On the issue of the Convention Against Torture, Seychelles has already ratified the convention and has accepted the individual communications procedure under Article 22. The government of Seychelles recognizes the importance of strengthening international cooperation in combating the illicit manufacturing and trafficking in firearms, their parts and components, and ammunition as part of broader efforts to address transnational organized crime. While Seychelles has not yet ratified this protocol, it remains committed to enhancing its legislative and institutional frameworks to prevent and combat illicit arms trafficking. On the right to freedom of expression, Seychelles reaffirms its strong commitment to upholding freedom of expression and the independence of the media, as guaranteed under Article 22(1) of the Constitution. This right is supported by a comprehensive legal and institutional framework designed to protect journalists and promote access to information. The Access to Information Act 2018 guarantees the right of individuals to access information held by public authorities, thereby promoting transparency and enabling journalists to effectively inform the public. The Seychelles Media Commission Act 2010 establishes an independent regulatory body responsible for overseeing the media sector and ensuring adherence to professional and ethical standards through its code of conduct. The Seychelles Media Commission operates as an independent body corporate with a composition designed to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability in its appointment process. On the issue of the Truth, Reconciliation and National Unity Commission, TRNUC, the Commission submitted its recommendations on the 2nd of May 2023. Since then, the state has taken steps to advance their implementation and to establish a structured mechanism for effective follow-up. Cabinet has approved the Commission for the enforcement, implementation, and monitoring of the recommendations of the Truth, Reconciliation and National Unity Commission Bill 2026. The bill provides for the establishment of an independent statutory commission with a mandate to enforce, implement, and monitor the recommendations contained in the TRNUC final report. The proposed commission will be responsible for facilitating the payment of reparations to victims through the Reparations Trust Fund, supporting rehabilitation measures, and ensuring proper follow-up on the findings of the TRNUC. It will also promote national education and awareness by preserving and documenting the findings and recommendations of the TRNUC, making them accessible through a national repository, and supporting initiatives that foster public understanding, historical awareness, reconciliation, unity, human rights, and respect for the rule of law. Now, I will hand the floor to Ambassador Cecilia Mangro. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Minister, on the issue of the right to education, this right is guaranteed under the Constitution of the Republic of Seychelles, which provides for compulsory and free education for at least 10 years. Article 27 further ensures equality before the law and prohibits discrimination, thereby guaranteeing equal treatment for all learners. This framework is reinforced by the Education Amendment Act and the Inclusive Education Policy of 2015, which promotes access to quality education for all children, including those with disabilities. In addition, the government has initiated discussion on a modern, fully accessible center to provide specialized services for children with additional needs. In 2024, the government strengthened child protection procedures through enhanced coordinations among stakeholders. This included the development of a comprehensive child protection standard operating procedure aimed at harmonizing practices across sectors and ensuring that child safety remains central to all investigation and intervention processes. Regular use of the National Risk Assessment Framework continues to guide referrals and case management, allowing for timely identification and support of at-risk children. Where parental drug abuse compromises a child's well-being, clear intervention measures are in place. This includes supervision orders enabling children to remain safely within their home environment where appropriate, as well as alternative care arrangements such as foster placement when parents are unable to provide adequate care in accordance with Article 24 and 25 of the Children's Act. On the issue of the rights of asylum seekers and refugees, the government of the Republic of Seychelles recognizes the importance of establishing an appropriate framework to address matters relating to asylum seekers and refugees. In this regard, Seychelles is currently in the process of developing a national policy to guide its approach to asylum and refugee protection. While Seychelles does not yet have a comprehensive legislative framework providing for the formal granting of asylum or refugee status, the government is actively considering the necessary legal and institutional measures required to address this issue. On the issue of the National Mechanism for Implementation, Reporting and Follow-up, NMIRF, the government is aware that it is facing challenges under its reporting obligations. To address these challenges, in February 2023, the Cabinet approved the establishment of Seychelles Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee, a dedicated mechanism to improve human rights reporting, address reporting backlogs, and strengthen compliance with the state's international human rights obligation, including under United Nations core human rights treaties. Within the last 2 years, Seychelles has also participated in 2 capacity building trainings conducted by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Regional Office for Southern Africa, and the Commonwealth Secretariat Small States Office on UPR and treaty body reporting. These trainings were aimed at increasing the institutional capacity of the committee and supporting Seychelles in strengthening its reporting obligations, follow-up processes, and implementation of human rights recommendations, including those arising from the UPR process. As a result of the increased institutional capacity and the strengthening of the committee, Seychelles is on track to finalize at least one of its outstanding treaty body reports by end of 2026.
Thank you, Ambassador. Madam Vice President, I would now like to hand the floor to Ms. Shirley Adrien from the Ministry of Social Affairs, Family and Equality.
Thank you, Minister. On the issue of gender equality, gender-based violence, and domestic violence, the government of the Republic of Seychelles is committed to strengthening national data system, institutional capacity, and interagency coordination to ensure the effective implementation and sustainability of reforms related to gender equality violence prevention, and victim support services in line with its commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 5. The government continues to advance gender mainstreaming across policies and programs, supported by the work of the Gender Secretariat, while maintaining strong female participation in education, leadership, and key sectors. The family policy is being finalized, and it aims to provide a comprehensive and integrated approach to family welfare. Seychelles has enacted the Domestic Violence Act 2020, which provides a comprehensive legal framework for the prevention of and response to domestic violence, including protection orders and support mechanisms for victims. A domestic violence technical committee was established in 2022 to guide the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act 2020. The committee drafted key operational tools, including guidelines for shelter management and an interagency manual to strengthen coordinated responses amongst government entities and civil societies. Seychelles is currently discussing the establishment of a domestic violence center. In the interim, support is provided through alternative arrangements, including counseling services and coordinated assistance from relevant agencies. Capacity building remains central to these efforts. Training programs and awareness initiatives, including those coordinated by the Family Wellbeing Division, such as the monthly Orange Day campaign, which continues to strengthen knowledge, prevention, and response mechanism across communities, particularly amongst young people. The Family Department has also established a strong collaboration with the Defense Institute Medical Operation, who conducted training in relation to gender-based violence, shelter management, and trauma-informed care. Seychelles is also a state party to key international and regional frameworks, including the CEDAW and the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development. These commitments guide national policies aimed at eliminating discrimination and promoting equal opportunities for women across sectors. In support of entrepreneurship, the government approved the National Entrepreneurship Strategy in 2022, which seeks to strengthen an inclusive and innovative-driven business environment. The strategy specifically addresses barriers faced by women entrepreneurs by promoting access to finance, business development services, mentorship, and market opportunities. The Enterprise Seychelles Agency continues to facilitate access to financial services, including grants and tailored loan products for women-owned small and medium enterprises. In addition, the Harbor for Her Trade platform provides women entrepreneurs with networking opportunities, market access, and business support to scale their activities. Over 1,000 Seychellois women are currently registered on the platform 50 Million African Women Speak, benefiting from its resources and connection. Seychelles is currently working towards signing an agreement with the COMESA Federation of National Association of Women in Business, which will further strengthen support structures for women entrepreneurs by enhancing regional cooperation, capacity building, and access to trade opportunities across Eastern and Southern Africa. The government promotes gender-responsive practices aimed at reducing practical and social barriers, including through advocacy for flexible work arrangement and supportive environments that enable women to balance economic activities with family responsibilities. On the issue of the rights of the elderly, the government of the Republic of Seychelles remains committed to combating ageism, eliminating age discrimination, and protecting the human rights of older persons, particularly in the context of increasing aging population. At the legislative and policy level, Seychelles has strengthened its social protection framework. Recent reforms include an increase in monthly pension to enhance income security for older persons. In addition, the Seychelles Home Care Agency Act has been enacted to regulate and improve the quality, safety, and accessibility of home-based services for the elderly. Efforts have also been made to improve access to justice for older persons. A memorandum of understanding between the judiciary and the department responsible for the elderly has facilitated better access to legal aid and judicial services. This includes the introduction of simplified informational materials, trained support personnel to guide elderly individuals through the legal processes, and the implementation of a fast-track system to prioritize access to court, services for older persons, and other.
Thank you, Minister. On the issue of the Sexual Offences Bill, the Government of Seychelles is currently advancing work on the draft bill aimed at preventing sexual offences, which has been developed through the Child Law Reform Committee. The bill is at an advanced stage of consideration, and the government is working towards its finalization and submission through the legislative process. Upon enactment, implementation will be guided by clear timelines set out within the legislation itself. In particular, the draft bill provides that within 1 year of its entry into force, a comprehensive national policy framework must be adopted and tabled before the National Assembly. This framework will guide the implementation, enforcement, and administration of the Act, ensuring a structured and timely rollout of its provisions. Matters, comprising key stakeholders, including the Attorney General's Office, law enforcement, health, education, social services, and the judiciary. This mechanism is designed to ensure a uniform, integrated, and multidisciplinary response to cases of sexual offences, particularly those involving children. In addition, the proposed legislation includes specific provisions to minimize secondary traumatization of victims. This includes access to essential healthcare services, such as post-exposure prophylaxis, as well as the possibility and under defined conditions for compulsory testing of alleged offenders for HIV and other sexually transmitted infections. The bill further ensures that victims are supported through coordinated services across sectors, including medical care, psychosocial support, and legal assistance. The national policy framework to be developed under the Act will further strengthen coordination by clearly defining the roles and responsibilities of all relevant institutions, promoting a child-sensitive, victim-centered approach, and ensuring the progressive realization of comprehensive support services. On the issue of trafficking in person, Seychelles international convention to which it is a party, including the to reinforce its legal framework. The Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons Act 2014 is currently under review to further strengthen victim protection and enhance where aggravated factors such as sexual exploitation, particularly involving children, are present. The government is also in the process of developing a bill on smuggling of migrants to complement the existing legislation and address remaining gaps. Victim protection remains a central pillar of the government's response. Victims of trafficking are provided with comprehensive support Seychelles continues to be recognized as a Tier 1 country in Trafficking in Persons report, demonstrating full compliance with minimum international standards. Thank you, Minister.
Ms. Kutzer, Madam Vice President, that brings us to the end of the
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Angola commends Seychelles for its national report, which reflects national realities and responds to recommendations of prior cycles and demonstrates a strong commitment to human rights and to the UPR process. We also congratulate Seychelles for being part to all 9 core human rights treaties and for developing a robust reporting mechanism. In a constructive spirit, Angola recommends Seychelles to continue strengthening efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence and empower women to increase their representation in public life, continue to reinforce investment in education and healthcare, particularly in rural areas, to ensure equitable and inclusive access to essential service for all citizens. Angola wishes Seychelles a successful review. I thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Armenia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Armenia welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and thanks for presenting the report. We commend Seychelles for its commitment to environmental protection and sustainable development. The alignment of its national policies with the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Paris Agreement reflects a forward-looking and responsible approach to addressing global environmental challenges. We also appreciate Seychelles' efforts to integrate biodiversity considerations into national planning and to promote conservation initiatives. Armenia respectfully recommends 1. Continue strengthening the implementation of human rights obligations with particular attention to ensuring equal access to justice and protection for all individuals. 2. Further enhance measures aimed at fighting domestic violence and providing comprehensive support to victims. 3. Expand biodiversity awareness and environmental education programs, including community-based initiatives that encourage public participation in conservation efforts. Armenia wishes Seychelles continued success in implementing the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We thank the delegation for its presentation. Seychelles' commitment to freedom of against hate speech based on protected characteristics, including race, religious belief, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability. Australia recommends Seychelles 1. Demonstrate ongoing commitment to freedom of political expression and open justice. 2. Enhance and enforce measures to address domestic violence in coordination with NGOs and the private sector to support survivors. And 3. Implement education and enforcement campaigns highlighting protected characteristics under the updated penal code, including for migrant workers. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Bahamas.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Bahamas warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for its comprehensive report. As a fellow archipelagic SIDS, we commend Seychelles for its continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly in the face of unique vulnerabilities associated with climate change and geographic dispersion. We also commend progress achieved since the last review, including legislative reforms to strengthen protections against discrimination, continued investment in universal healthcare and education, and efforts to advance environmental sustainability and ocean governance. With a view to encouraging further progress, the Bahamas respectfully recommends that Seychelles, 1, continue integrating climate resilience into national development planning and budgeting, including through investment in climate-resilient infrastructure and partnerships with international development partners. 2, strengthen implementation non-communicable diseases and promote mental health, including through prevention strategies, early intervention programs, and expanded support services for youth and vulnerable communities. The Bahamas encourages Seychelles to continue seeking technical assistance and capacity building support in line with its national priorities. We wish Seychelles every success in this review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Bangladesh welcomes the distinguished delegation. We commend the government of Seychelles for its continued efforts to advance the human rights of its people, including through the review and enactment of new legislation. In a spirit of constructive cooperation, Bangladesh would like to recommend 1. Take further measures to protect the rights of migrant workers, including by strengthening social and legal protection mechanism. 2. Strengthen efforts on climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and environmental protection with a focus on building community resilience and promoting sustainable livelihoods. 3. Enhance efforts to advance the inclusion and meaningful participation of persons with disabilities. 4. Continue investing in health, education, skill development, and job creation. We wish the delegation a successful review. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Botswana.
Madam Vice President, Botswana warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles to the fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review. Botswana commends the strengthened legal framework encompassing gender matters, family protections, and social security. Botswana further notes the support extended to victims of trafficking through the provision of shelter, essential services, and legal assistance. Botswana further applauds Seychelles for its commitment to sustainability and climate change resilience, and we encourage the continued integration of human rights-based approaches into national environmental and climate policies. Botswana proffers the following recommendations to advance the promotion and protection of human rights in Seychelles. 1. Guarantee the right to education for all migrants. 2. Ensure due process safeguards in all procedures concerning the investigation, arrest, detention, and expulsion of migrants, including access to legal assistance, timely judicial review, and protection against arbitrary expulsions. We wish Seychelles a successful review outcome. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Brazil welcomes the delegation of Seychelles. We commend the introduction of hate crime provisions protecting individuals on the grounds of sexual orientations in Seychelles domestic legislation. Brazil also praises the adoption of the Prison Service Strategic Plan 2024-2029, aimed at reorienting the correctional system towards rehabilitation and social reintegration. We encourage Seychelles to fully operationalize its Human Rights Commission by strengthening its human and financial resources and enhancing coordination with relevant government departments. In a constructive spirit, Brazil recommends that Seychelles 1. Strengthen measures to promote gender equality and to ensure effective protection for victims of gender-based violence, addressing challenges such as cyber violence against women and girls, as well as systematic barriers that have led to a decline in women's political participation. 2. Enhance the protection of press freedom and freedom of expression, ensuring safe and enabling environments for journalists and independent media, free from all forms of intimidation and harassment. We wish Seychelles an excellent review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Burundi.
Merci.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Vice President. My delegation would like to welcome the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and wish them every success in the CPR. We commend Seychelles, which has recorded a very high level of human development and is pursuing efforts to overcome particular ongoing challenges in the spheres of education, health, and the promotion of women's rights. We note with satisfaction that the implementation of the Strategic Health Plan 2022-2026 is effectively contributing to reducing child and maternal mortality rates to one of the lowest in the world. We also hail the commitment shown in combating forced labor and human trafficking, which is often found in the sectors of fishing, agriculture, and construction, as well as measures begun to strengthen protection and care for victims. In a constructive spirit, my delegation will make two recommendations. 1, redouble efforts towards advance mainstreaming of gender issues so as to encourage strong participation of women in education, management posts and decision-making posts, as well as initiating specific programs and projects vis-à-vis women's economic empowerment. Thank you.
See. Next, I give the floor to Cabo Verde.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Cabo Verde cordially greets the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the constructive participation in this UPR process. We recognize and acknowledge the progress achieved by the country when it comes to human rights, particularly in the areas of health, education, and human and economic development. However, we would voice concern at the prevalence and consequences of drug consumption among children and adolescents, as well as discrimination in the educational sector and against persons with disabilities. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Cabo Verde recommends to Seychelles that 1, it intensify efforts to prevent undue drug use among children and adolescents. 2, incorporate in educational legislation prohibitions which expressly ban discrimination in that sector. 3, institutionalize ongoing training on the Nelson Mandela rules with the purpose of strengthening security and daily management of prisons. Cabo Verde wishes Seychelles every success in the CPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Canada thanks Seychelles for participating in this UPR and commends them on reforms strengthening protection for women and children. Canada recommends that Seychelles, 1, fully implement the law on spousal violence from 2020 so that there are shelters that are properly equipped with resources and trained staff in police facilities, as well as awareness-raising campaigns at the national level. 2, adopt the draft law aiming at the prevention of sexual crimes and ensuring access of children to specialized investigation, medical and psychosocial support services. 3, bolster women's economic participation by mainstreaming gender-sensitive measures in labor market reforms, expanding access to requalification and training programs, and addressing obstacles linked to care. Lastly, by way of concluding observations, Canada encourages continued strengthening of implementation of the law on spousal violence from 2020. Thank you.
Merci. Next, I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Chile welcomes the delegation of Seychelles, and we also welcome the consolidation of a standalone budget for the Human Rights Commission as a significant step towards strengthening its independence and institutional capacity in the promotion and protection of human rights. Constructively, Chile would make the following recommendations to Seychelles. 1, criminalize torture as a standalone crime in national criminal legislation in line with the definition in the Convention Against Torture, including all the constituting elements and establishing proper sanctions that are in line with the gravity of the crime. 2, adopt comprehensive legislation to prevent, punish and eradicate all forms of violence against women. 3, amend the law on cybercrime to include crimes linked to disinformation, establish key safeguards against abuse, and prevent prohibiting effects on the freedom of expression. 4, consolidate the independence of the Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles and facilitate its obtaining A status, including by broadening its monitoring capacity. We wish Seychelles a successful review cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to China.
Madam Vice President, China welcomes Seychelles constructive participating in the UPR, commends Seychelles for having acceded to and ratified a number of international instruments, implemented laws and regulations to strengthen the rule of law and protect and promote human rights, combating human trafficking, safeguarding media and press freedom, protecting the rights of vulnerable groups, including women, children, and persons with disability, and making positive efforts to improve employment, education, and healthcare. China would like to make 2 recommendations. First, continue promoting sustainable economic and social development, reducing poverty, Second, increase investment in law enforcement, climate change response, and disaster prevention and mitigation. China wishes Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Colombia welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and commends it on its collaboration with the Office of High Commissioner when it comes to strengthening the Human Rights Commission, as well as efforts to achieve reforms regarding gender equality in legislation and policy. We constructively recommend that they, one, strengthen the allocation of human, technical, and financial resources to the Human Rights Commission so that it can fully implement the Strategic Plan 2024-2027. Two, bearing in mind the relevance and the standing invitation extended to special procedures mandate holders, particularly in the context of climate change, to continue that. And three, update and adopt the National Gender-Based Violence Action Plan. And four, step up efforts to prevent the underuse of drugs and address their consumption and use from a public health and human rights-based approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Congo.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Congo warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and congratulates it on the presentation of the report under the fourth EPR cycle. My country commends Seychelles on efforts to promote and protect human rights over recent years. These efforts have led particularly to the provision of procedural assistance for persons with disabilities for judicial services, as well as the provision of home care for older persons. While recognizing and acknowledging these efforts, Congo would like to encourage Seychelles to pay particular attention to environmental protection and to combating deforestation. Constructively, we would recommend that Seychelles, one, redouble efforts so as to strengthen measures to combat drug use among children and adolescents. Two, increase the number of qualified teachers to address challenges linked to children's education. Congo wishes Seychelles every success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Costa Rica.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Costa Rica thanks Seychelles for the presentation of the national report and for the broad response to the advanced questions put by Slovenia, Maldives, and Costa Rica on the human right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. Costa Rica recommends that Seychelles, one, expand and institutionalize community participation programs, as well as recreation and leisure for children and young people with a human rights-based approach to prevent undue use of drugs. Two, establish a specialized mechanism to promote public policies on gender equality with guiding services, a clear mandate, human rights-based approach, and sufficient human and financial resources and technical autonomy when it comes to other areas such as youth, sport, and family. Three, adopt norms to establish special measures such as parity and alternating candidacies to expedite the participation and representation of women in political and public life, taking into account structural factors such as single parenthood. Four, promote the human right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment by broadening access to climate-resistant housing and infrastructure, strengthening sustainable management of water resources, and providing investment for access to drinking water. We wish Seychelles every success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Côte d'Ivoire warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the presentation of the national report. My delegation commends the government of Seychelles on efforts achieved when it comes to promoting and protecting human rights, particularly through the ratification of various international instruments, implementation of inclusive education policies, as well as awareness-raising activities for families and children on issues of child ill treatment and domestic violence. My country also welcomes actions undertaken in the sphere of healthcare aiming to ensure universal, free and equitable access to healthcare, with notable progress in terms of life expectancy, placing the country 67th out of 193 countries, according to the Human Development Index 2023-2024. In a constructive spirit, my delegation will make the following recommendations. 1. Ratify the Convention on the Status of Stateless Persons, and 2. Redouble efforts to combat non-transmissible diseases, in particular obesity. To conclude, Côte d'Ivoire wishes Seychelles every success. Thank you.
Merci. Next, I give the floor to Cuba.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. We warmly greet the delegation of Seychelles and we acknowledge the commitment of this country to the UPR. We positively note the adoption in 2022 of the law on home assistance for provision of home services to older persons, the persons with disabilities, and other people in need of this. In the constructive spirit, we would make the following recommendations. 1, continue to make progress with implementing the law on early childhood development. 2, proceed with implementation of the National Strategic Health Plan 2022-2026 to increase life expectancy and to maintain the good results in maternal child health. 3, continue stepping up national efforts to guarantee the right to education of children with disabilities. We wish Seychelles every success in this review and in implementing the accepted recommendations. Thank you very much indeed, Madam.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Cyprus.
Cyprus warmly welcomes the delegation from Seychelles and thanks for the presentation of the report. We welcome the work carried out by the Seychelles Human Rights Commission, as well as the reforms undertaken by the government in the areas of detention and prison system, reform, judicial independence and impartiality, employment and freedom of speech. At the same time, we commend Seychelles' commitment to improving the role and status of women in the workplace and society, to maintaining a constructive dialogue with the LGBTQ community, and to further promoting youth rights. Cyprus would like to make the following recommendations. Ratify the optional protocol to the ICESCR. Consider enacting comprehensive legislation criminalizing all forms of violence against women, including marital rape. Review existing legal framework and develop a national policy to guarantee the rights of persons with disabilities. Consider ensuring the allocation of sufficient and adequate human, technical, and financial resources for the education system. And then establish a national coordination mechanism to ensure inclusive and accountable climate governance, expand access to climate-resilient housing and infrastructure for vulnerable populations, and strengthen sustainable management of water resources. We wish the Seychelles a successful review.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Dominica.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Dominican Republic greets the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and commends the country on the progress achieved in the promotion and protection of human rights, in particular through legislative reforms aimed at strengthening institutions and the protection of vulnerable groups, including the adoption of laws against corruption, domestic violence, and human trafficking, as well as the creation of the National Human Rights Commission, the adoption of the National Strategic Framework for Disability, and efforts to broaden universal access to education. In this constructive spirit, we recommend that Seychelles 1, ratify the Convention combating discrimination in education, 2, pursue efforts to ensure full incorporation of a human rights-based approach for persons with disabilities in all public policies, 3, strengthen the capacity of the Anti-Corruption Commission to detect, investigate, and properly punish cases of corruption. We wish Seychelles a successful UPR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominican Republic, for your statement. I now call still Dominica, please, to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Dominica warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and expresses sincere appreciation for the country's comprehensive national report. We commend Seychelles for the significant progress achieved since its previous review despite the vulnerabilities and constraints faced as a small island developing state. In particular, we laud progress made in advancing the right to health, including through the expansion of universal and equitable access to healthcare services and the enhancement of immunization coverage and disease prevention programs. In a constructive spirit, Dominica recommends that Seychelles, 1, accelerate efforts to improve the quality of education and its accessibility to all children, especially children with disabilities. 2, integrate climate change considerations into national development planning in accordance with international human rights obligations. We wish the delegation of Seychelles every success during the UPR process. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Eritrea.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We warmly welcome the distinguished delegation of the Seychelles. We acknowledge the progress achieved in advancing the rights to education, health, and environmental protection. We commend the strengthening of inclusive education policies and expanded support for vulnerable groups, including girls returning to education after childbirth and children with disabilities. In the health sector, we recognize Seychelles' commitment to universal, free, and equitable access to health care under its national strategy. We also acknowledge Seychelles' strong commitment to environmental protection. As a small island developing state, Seychelles faces unique vulnerabilities, and we fully understand the importance of these efforts. We respectfully offer the following recommendations. 1, continue strengthening inclusive and quality education by addressing remaining learning gaps and further supporting teachers and vulnerable learners. 2, continue strengthening environmental protection and biodiversity conservation through effective implementation of national legislation and international commitments. We wish the Seychelles every success in implementing the recommendations it accepts. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Estonia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Estonia welcomes the delegation of Seychelles to its 4th UPR. Estonia welcomes Seychelles' engagement with the UPR process and its efforts to advance human rights domestically. We commend Seychelles for its ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention of the Rights of the Child and for strengthening child protection systems. We also commend the adoption of the 2024 to 2028 National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security and for its efforts in improving the role and status of women at the workplace and society. Estonia recommends Seychelles to 1, reinforce, adapt and modernize comprehensive sexual education curriculum in schools. 2, strengthen legal recognition and protection of same-sex couples, including through recognition of same-sex marriage and partnerships. 3, strengthen prevention of and response to gender-based violence, including by fully implementing the Domestic Violence Act and related action plans. 4, ensure that adolescents have confidential access to modern forms of contraceptives and comprehensive information on sexual and reproductive health and rights. We wish Seychelles a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Eswatini.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Eswatini thanks Seychelles for the presentation of its national report and commends the government for the progress achieved since the last review. We welcome the ratification of important international instruments as well as continued efforts to strengthen human rights protection and access to justice. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend that Seychelles, 1, continue strengthening inclusive and equitable access to quality education for all children, including measures aimed at reducing school dropout rates and supporting vulnerable learners. 2, consider ratifying outstanding international human rights instruments and optional protocols, including the optional protocol to the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ethiopia warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the presentation of its national report as well as its engagement with the Universal Periodic Review process. We commend Seychelles for its continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly its effort to strengthen good governance, environmental protection, and social development. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ethiopia makes the following 2 recommendations. 1, continue strengthening effort to enhance climate change adaptations and environmental sustainability. 2, continue improving access to affordable and quality healthcare and education, particularly in vulnerable populations. In conclusion, Ethiopia wishes Seychelles every success in this review process. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to France.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. France welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the report. France also welcomes Seychelles' commitment to human rights, democratic governance, and gender equality. France recommends in a constructive spirit that Seychelles 1 ratify the International Convention on the Protection of all persons from enforced disappearance and the optional protocol to the Convention against torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. 2, combat gender-based violence by ensuring sustainable financing of refuge structures for victims of violence. 3, soften legal conditions of access for abortion. And 4, pursue efforts to combat gender-based violence against LGBTI persons by incorporating legal recognition of same-sex couples. France wishes Seychelles every success in the UPR. Thank you.
Merci. Next, I give the floor to Gabon.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Vice President. Gabon extends a warm welcome to the Seychelles delegation. We congratulate them for the presentation of the national report. We recognize the ongoing efforts in the Seychelles to promote and protect human rights, including when it comes to protection of childhood. In a constructive spirit, my delegation would make the following recommendations. 1, step up measures to promote education for pregnant girls or mothers of families. 2, allocate human, technical, financial resources at a sufficient appropriate level to the educational system while encouraging positive measures to ensure protection of human rights. We wish Seychelles a fruitful UPR. Thank you.
Merci. Next, I give the floor to Gambia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Gambia extends a warm welcome to the delegation of Seychelles and commends its continued engagement with the UPR process. We commend Seychelles for its strong performance in the 2024 Ibrahim Index of African Governance, as well as for the enactment of several human rights-related laws and its efforts to improve reporting and implementation on the human rights treaties. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, the Gambia makes the following recommendations. 1, intensify efforts to strengthen the independence and funding of the Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles. 2, strengthen measures to prevent and combat trafficking in persons, including through effective investigation, prosecution, victim support, and reintegration services. 3, strengthen efforts to enforce laws against gender-based violence and establish facilities that provide redress and specialized services for victims of sexual violence. We wish Seychelles every success in implementing its human rights commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Georgia warmly welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Seychelles and thanks the head of the delegation for the presentation of the national report. My delegation notes with appreciation the strengthening of Seychelles' human rights framework through key legislative reforms. We positively assess government's measures to enhance the protection of vulnerable groups, including prohibiting corporal punishment, raising the age of the criminal responsibility, addressing gender-based violence, and improving services for persons with disabilities. With this in mind, Georgia recommends to the government of Seychelles, 1, to continue efforts to combat human trafficking and strengthen support for the victims, 2, to continue taking further steps to strengthen women's empowerment policies and address violence against women. We wish the delegation of Seychelles a very successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Germany.
Madam Vice President, Germany welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and notes with appreciation the continuous efforts to further strengthen human rights in the country. Germany commends Seychelles for the ratification of several important UN human rights treaties and for the establishment of a National Human Rights Commission. Noting remaining challenges concerning the protection of vulnerable groups, Germany encourages Seychelles to continue its commitment and recommends to, first, further strengthen children's rights with special regard to safety and equality of girls in schools. Second, further strengthen women's rights, including those of minors, with special regard to sexual and reproductive health and rights, the right to self-determination, and the protection from gender-based violence. 3, pay special attention to the rights of marginalized and vulnerable groups, such as people with disabilities, LGBTIQ+ persons, refugees, and the elderly. We wish Seychelles a very successful review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Ghana.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ghana warmly welcomes the delegation of Seychelles to the fourth cycle of the UPR. We note with appreciation Seychelles' successful conduct of peaceful and credible elections in 2025, which led to an orderly transfer of power, reflecting the country's commitment to upholding political and civil rights. Ghana also commends Seychelles' commitment to advancing SDG 3, as well as demonstrated through the nationwide implementation of the Seychelles package of essential non-communicable disease management, aimed at enhancing the prevention, early detection, and management of non-communicable diseases. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ghana offers the following recommendation to Seychelles. 1, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. And 2, ensure the allocation of sufficient and adequate human, technical, and financial resources to the education system. Ghana wishes Seychelles every success in this UPR process. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation to address observations and comments that have been raised so far. Excellency, you have the floor.
On the rights of prisoners, including the prison riot, Seychelles has taken steps to improve and strengthen respect of the rights of sentenced persons and has taken steps to protect incarcerated persons against excessive use of force. Seychelles acknowledges the recent riot and has set up a commission, an independent commission of inquiry under the Commission of Inquiry Act to investigate the Montagne-Posay prison riot of the 6th and 7th of December 2024. The commission sworn in by the president in March this year, that is under the new administration, is mandated to establish the facts, examine the response of prison, police, and defense authorities, assess the use of force and any possible human rights violations, and make recommendations. It is required to submit its report within 6 months of its first sitting and has powers to summon witnesses, require documents, and receive evidence under oath. In an effort to prevent future incidents, our report highlights the intention of the government to classify inmates as either low or high risk. This classification is aimed at reducing incidents between inmates, including physical assaults and coercions. The construction of a new high security prison facility and a low risk rehabilitation facility is also under development to support classification-based management and reduce institutional tensions while enhancing rehabilitation outcomes. Seychelles has reinforced efforts on security to prevent incidents from reoccurring through an increase in frequency and intensity of daily searches conducted in cells. This is to ensure that the detainees are able to harbor or have access to potentially dangerous tools or weapons. They are not able to hide, harbor, or have access to potentially dangerous tools or weapons. On the subject of the protection from degrading treatment, the government has taken steps to ensure that its inherent duty, to maintain public order and enforce the law and the enforcement of the law is balanced with respect to fundamental rights and protection against arbitrary detention. Arrests and detention are carried out according to clearly established legal procedures. Officers receive proper training on human rights standards. Detained persons are treated humanely and have access to health care, legal representation, and family contact. Independent oversight bodies are able to review allegations of abuse or unlawful detention. On the promotion and access to social protection, Seychelles continues to implement measures aimed at reducing inequalities and safeguarding the economic and social rights of its population. These measures include continued increases in the minimum wage to support workers' purchasing power and socio-economic resilience in light of inflationary pressures. Revision of welfare benefits, including expanded maternity, paternity, foster care, survivor, and child assistance benefits to strengthen social protection for families and vulnerable groups. Introduction of the multiple birth benefit to provide additional support to families with multiple births. Continued access to welfare assistance through the Agency for Social Protection for Individuals and Households facing financial hardship, employment reskilling and skills development programs aimed at promoting sustainable employment opportunities and reducing long-term welfare dependency, targeted assistance programs for elderly persons, persons with disabilities, and vulnerable families through various social assistance mechanisms, the Breakfast for All initiative under the Ministry of Education, which supports children's welfare and access to education by ensuring students receive a nutritious morning meal, concessions within the fishery sector, including assistance on fuel and ice, as well as exemptions from berthing fees for fishing vessels aimed at supporting livelihoods and food security, subsidies and price control measures on certain essential goods and services to mitigate the impact of rising costs. May I invite Madam Vice President now, Ambassador Celia Mangru to take the floor.
On the matter of law enforcement, Seychelles continues to strengthen human rights protection within the justice and law enforcement sectors. Police recruits receive mandatory human rights training through the Seychelles Police Academy, including on the rights of detainees, women, and minors, while new standard operating procedures are being developed to reinforce compliance with human rights standards. The police also receives training through the Attorney General's Office on Domestic Violence. Additionally, the Domestic Violence Act also features in the Police Academy curriculum. Mechanisms are in place for the public to lodge complaints against police misconduct with disciplinary action, including dismissals, taken where abuses of power are confirmed. The recent introduction of body cameras further promotes transparency and accountability. In addition, a criminal justice stakeholder forum established in 2023 brings together key institutions to improve coordination, detainee welfare, legal aid access, and protection of rights within the justice system. Seychelles also continues to uphold constitutional safeguards requiring detainees to be processed within 24 hours and to receive necessary support services. Renovations and construction of police stations undertaken in collaboration with the Seychelles Human Rights Commission have further improved detention conditions and detainee welfare. On the issue of access to contraceptive and teenage pregnancy, Seychelles recognizes that there is a disparity between the age of consent and access to contraceptives. While national discussions on the matter are still ongoing, several efforts being done nationally to empower young children on sexuality education. In 2025, the Family Section of the Ministry of Health conducted training on comprehensive sexual education program with staff from relevant institutions. This training aimed to provide individuals working with children with skills to provide support to young children and the parent in dealing with sexuality and relationship matters. NGOs are also implementing programs that target teenage mothers. The program provides a supportive environment for the teenage mothers and their children where they are supported and empowered through educational talks and other sessions addressing issues such as key parenting, health, and social issues. A multi-sectoral committee was also set up to address the issue of teenage pregnancy. The committee advocates for a strategic and coordinated approach to make services available for teenage mothers, contribute towards prevention programs to reduce the incidence of teenage pregnancy in Seychelles. The pregnant student policy and procedures encourages students to return to school after having the baby. The Employment Department provides avenues to support the vulnerable, including teenage mothers, through the Skills Development Program to become productive citizens. In early 2025, the Ministry of Health, along with its partners, launched the Youth Education for Success, YES, campaign, which aims to empower adolescents as well as their parents by discussing topics such as sexual and reproductive health. Rights of children. There have been several enacted legislations pertaining to the rights of the child. For example, the Children Care Home Regulations ensures that children in care homes are living in a safe and nurturing environment. Suitability check regulations ensures that there are background checks on people involved in child-related work. This, we hope, will reduce issues relating to child abuse and domestic violence, which not only affect women, but also children. Additionally, the Children Act is also being reviewed to address current child-related matters and domesticate international convention. Social services officers, as well as police officers, and all child protection partners receive training on child protection. The age of criminal responsibility was increased from 7 to 10 years as per the Penal Code Amendment Bill 2021. The Youth Hope Center will also deliver behavior modification program for at-risk children. With regards to human trafficking, Madam Vice President, on the issue of the protection of migrant workers and the protection against trafficking and abuse, the government of Seychelles reiterates its firm commitment in support of this specific group of persons. In addition to the legislation passed, the National Task Force continues to receive necessary training in order to better protect victims or potential victims against trafficking. We have a dedicated 24-hour hotline which remains operational in order to tend to any trafficking or suspected trafficking incidents. Victim protections remain a priority, and Seychelles continues to provide access to free shelter, basic needs, and legal services. If victims are entitled to compensation, it is worth noting that the country has effective mechanisms to ensure that they are provided. While Seychelles has taken these important steps to protect victims of trafficking, challenges related to human resources remain such as effective coordination, which is also vital when it comes to victim protection. That being said, government is pleased to inform that financial provisions to protect victims remain important, and it is not compromised. Finally, I wish to emphasize the importance of the bill on the smuggling of migrant workers with the aim of addressing gaps in the law and subsequently enhance the protection of victims. On the issue of freedom of assembly, Article 23 of the Seychelles Constitution confers the right to freely partake in peaceful assemblies. However, there are also measures in place to balance this right with others and protect public safety. These include informing the police department prior to such events taking place so that they may provide the necessary support or advice to facilitate the assembly and ensure the safety of those in attendance and of the public. During the 2025 election, several political rallies took place leading up to the election, allowing Seychellois to gather and freely express their political views. Thank you, Minister.
President, on the issue of education and teacher training, Seychelles continues to strengthen the quality of education through sustained investment in teacher training and professional development. The Education Regulation 2021 promotes teaching as a professional discipline by establishing codes of conduct, teacher registration and certification systems, and collaboration on qualification and training requirements. The government is also enhancing specialized training for teachers and staff, including through partnerships with international institutions to better support inclusive education and the needs of children with disabilities. In parallel, policies, curriculum, and teacher training programs are being updated to create a responsive and future-ready education system aligned with national development priorities and inclusive learning objectives. Seychelles continues to strengthen support for vulnerable learners through its inclusive education policies and targeted educational measures. Efforts are being made to ensure equal access to quality education for children with disabilities, learning differences, teenage mothers, and other vulnerable groups. Teachers and educational staff receive specialized training to better respond to diverse learning needs, while policies at secondary and post-secondary levels support young mothers in continuing their education. The government is also working to enhance specialized services and inclusive learning environments to ensure that all learners are empowered to reach their full potential. Seychelles continues to implement measures aimed at reducing school dropout rates and ensuring that all children have access to continuous education. Efforts include strengthening inclusive education policies, supporting vulnerable learners, and maintaining policies that enable teenage mothers to return to school and continue their studies. Compulsory education remains guaranteed under the Education Amendment Act 2017, which ensures children complete their primary and secondary education up to the age of 15. On the issue of protection of victims of gender-based violence, the Cybercrimes and Other Related Crimes Amendment Act 2025 modernizes legal frameworks to combat digital threats, aligning with international standards. Key updates include enhanced investigative powers for authorities to prosecute cybercrime, criminalizing digital crimes such as revenge pornography, strengthening data protection, and facilitating international cooperation for cross-border digital offenses. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank the delegation for information provided. We will now continue with the interactive dialogue, and I give the floor to Guyana.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and I'm happy to see the composition of the podium this afternoon. Guyana warmly welcomes the Honorable Barry Farr, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, and his distinguished delegation. And again, commendations to the composition of that delegation. We extend our thanks for the comprehensive report. We commend Seychelles on the important developments and activities supported since the last review, including the SADC Protocol Against Corruption, Trade of Wild Fauna and Flora Act of 2021, and the Mental Health Care Tribunal Regulations of 2021. As a small island developing state like Seychelles, Guyana understands and appreciates the challenges caused by the vagaries of the ever-expanding climate crisis and its impact on all areas of daily life. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Guyana proposes the following recommendations: full implementation of and provision of additional resources to the Seychelles package of essential non-communicable diseases to prevention and management of NCDs. Ensure universal access to menstrual products for all women and girls and family planning support, and include climate adaptation into national development planning. Guyana wishes Seychelles the very best in this process. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Iceland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Iceland welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and its national report. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Iceland recommends the following. 1. Intensify efforts to combat GBV by criminalizing all forms of violence against women, including marital rape. 2. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health information and services, including family planning services. 3. Intensify efforts to improve institutional structures and mechanisms to protect children from sexual abuse. 4. Raise the minimum age of marriage to 18 years without exception. 5. Amend anti-discrimination legislation to explicitly cover SOGIESC as prohibited grounds of discrimination. 6. Ensure legal recognition of same-sex couples. We wish Seychelles all success for its review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
India warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles led by His Excellency Foreign Minister and thanks them for their presentation today. We recommend the progress made by Seychelles in various areas relating to promotion and protection of human rights in their country. In particular, various legislative policy measures for improving education, mental health care, media freedom, and prison reforms. Further, we also note with appreciation the facilitation to use of Braille tactile folders at the polling stations, a great step towards recognizing the right of disabled. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, India recommends the following to Seychelles. First, continue its policies and programs towards realization of right to education of children in Seychelles. And second, continue its efforts towards inclusive participation of women in economic and political life. We wish the delegation of Seychelles all the success in its review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Indonesia welcomes the delegation of Seychelles to the fourth cycle of UPR and thank them for preparing the national report. We commend Seychelles' progress in strengthening legal framework to improve the rights of its people by ratifying relevant international instruments and enacting a number of new laws. We particularly recognize Seychelles' enhanced efforts to address the issue of trafficking in persons, including in labor sector, and protect the rights of the victims by amending the penal code to increase sentence for the perpetrators. To further support human rights in Seychelles, we offer the following recommendations. 1. Strengthen the national human rights institution to be in compliance with the Paris Principles by allocating adequate resources. 2. Continue implementing national initiatives to address climate change, aim to safeguard the rights of its people to a clean and healthy environment. 3. Continue efforts to achieve universal healthcare coverage by enhancing the quality of primary healthcare services for all its citizens. And 4. Ensure that all migrant workers and their family members fully enjoy their basic rights, including social security and healthcare services. Finally, we wish Seychelles a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Iran. Iran is absent. So next I give the floor to Iraq.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The delegation of Iraq would like to welcome the head and members of the Seychelles delegation participating in this fourth cycle of the UPR. And we thank the delegation for preparing the report. We'd like to recommend what follows. First, to strengthen efforts to reduce school dropout rates as an initial step towards full prevention. Second, to take the necessary measures to ensure that all persons implicated in human trafficking and sexual exploitation are brought to justice. In conclusion, we'd like to wish Seychelles every success in this UPR cycle. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
To Ireland.
Ireland welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for its presentation today. Ireland welcomes Seychelles' efforts to advance human rights domestically and commends progress made since the last EPR cycle. We recognise the steps taken by Seychelles to improve the protection of women's rights, including the establishment of a Domestic Violence Technical Committee to develop a roadmap for the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act 2020. In addition, we welcome the establishment of the Human Rights Treaty Reporting Committee as the national mechanism for reporting and follow-up. Ireland also acknowledges the increases in state funding to the Seychelles Human Rights Commission, but is concerned that the Commission continues to face significant financial and operational challenges. Ireland recommends that Seychelles, 1, introduce comprehensive legislation to criminalise all forms of violence against women, including marital rape and technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and 2, review the National Council for Disabled Persons Act 1994 to ensure its full alignment with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and develop a national policy to guarantee the rights of persons with disabilities. We wish Seychelles every success in the CPR cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Italy.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank the distinguished delegation of Seychelles for their presentation. Italy welcomes the ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure and the significant efforts made in combating trafficking in person, both part of our recommendation during the last UPR cycle. Italy offers Seychelles the following recommendations: adopt and implement a comprehensive national strategy to prevent and combat child abuse and exploitation, including online exploitation, and strengthen social services and rehabilitation mechanisms. Consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We wish Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Jordan by video message.
Madam Vice President, it is a pleasure to welcome the delegation of Seychelles, and we appreciate all the efforts made in providing the national report, which reflects the progress made in promoting the legislative and institutional human rights framework in the country, particularly in the areas of child protection, promotion of equality, and development of the judiciary. We'd like to recommend what follows. First, to continue efforts to strengthen the protection of children's rights, including through combating all forms of violence and abuse against children. Secondly, to continue to develop and implement national policies and strategies on climate change with a focus on capacity building and strengthening resilience. In conclusion, we would like to wish the Republic of Seychelles every success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Kiribati.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Kiribati welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for its presentation and engagement during the Universal Periodic Review process. We note with appreciation the government's effort to promote human rights through legislative reforms, particularly in advancing children's rights, including the introduction of Children's Care Homes Regulation in 2022, the prohibition of corporal punishment through the Children Act, and the abolition of marriage under 18 through amendments to the Civil Status Act and Civil Code in 2020. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Kiribati makes the following recommendations. 1. To review and align the legal framework with the Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and develop a national policy to ensure inclusion, accessibility, and the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. 2. To strengthen the Seychelles Human Rights Commission in compliance with the Paris Principles. We wish Seychelles every success in the review process. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Lebanon.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President. The delegation of Lebanon welcomes the delegation of Seychelles and thanks it for the complimentary remarks. Lebanon commends Seychelles for the progress achieved since its previous review, particularly the strengthening of its human rights framework, national institutions, and access to justice. We welcome the important measures adopted to promote inclusions for persons with disabilities. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Lebanon would like to recommend that Seychelles, 1. Continue strengthening the implementation of reforms aimed at protecting the rights of women, children, persons with disabilities, and vulnerable groups. 2. Further enhance access to justice, rehabilitation, and support services for victims of trafficking and all forms of violence. Madam Vice President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Lesotho.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Kingdom of Lesotho welcomes the distinguished delegation of Seychelles of criminal defamation laws. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Lesotho recommends Seychelles to 1. Strengthen the Human Rights Commission's independence and funding resources in accordance with the Paris Principles to guarantee its efficient operation.
elections. 3, develop policies to combat gender-based violence, such as enacting comprehensive laws and strengthening support services for survivors. Lesotho
Malaysia commends Seychelles for the important legislative reform undertaken, particularly on improving the rights of women, children, and persons with disabilities. We also commend the continued engagement with human rights international mechanism to further improve human rights in the country. Principles. Second, strengthen efforts to improve access to sexual and reproductive health services and education, including for adolescents. And third, enhance measures to prevent and address gender-based violence, including by strengthening legal frameworks, data collection, and support services for survivors' education. We wish Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Maldives. Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Vice President, the Maldives warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation from Seychelles to this fourth cycle review and thanks the delegation for their presentation today. The Maldives commends Seychelles for ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure and welcomes its continued efforts to strengthen child protection mechanisms. In a constructive spirit, the Maldives makes the following 2 recommendations. 1, integrate climate adaptation into national development planning to protect the rights to housing, health, water, security, and livelihoods. 2, ensure adequate human, technical, and financial resources for the education system to reduce school dropout and improve access to education. We wish our fellow small island developing state, Seychelles, a successful review. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Mali.
Merci, Madame la
Boys at the age of adolescence, my delegation would highlight the notable efforts to address the SDG 4 indicators, which highlight the determination of the government to ensure equitable, inclusive education and make that a driver for development of the country. We also commend the government on the implementation of the Phoenix program, aiming at reintegrating detainees into society. We constructively recommend to Seychelles that they, 1, adopt an action plan on reproductive health and create the standing body in charge of coordinating and in monitoring and implementation of the national policy and plan of action, conduct research on school dropout with a view to updating lasting solutions to ensure that these target children and young people.
Presentation of the report. As a fellow CITS, we commend the Seychelles on their initiatives to tackle the adverse impacts of climate change. In particular, we are encouraged by the 2025 submission of the Seychelles' third NDC and the enactment of its national solid waste policy 2025 to 2030. These efforts reflect the Seychelles' commitment to environmental and biodiversity protection. In addition, we welcome the Seychelles' efforts to strengthen the protection and rights of persons with disabilities. In that regard, we positively note the ongoing development of a disability rights bill and the coordination of awareness raising programs. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. 1, further promote the rights of persons with disabilities by aligning its legal framework to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. 2, continue efforts to ensure inclusive environmental, climate change, and disaster risk reduction policies by promoting human rights-based and gender-responsive approaches. And 3, ratify the optional protocol to the CRC on a communications procedure. We wish the delegation every success during the 4th UVR cycle.
Next, I give the floor to Mauritania.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mauritania, I would like to welcome the delegation of Seychelles and commends its constructive engagement with the UPR mechanism the field of health, education, and social protection. In a constructive spirit, Mauritania would like to submit the following recommendations. First, continue the efforts to promote the efficiency of the NHRI in Seychelles through providing it with necessary funds and ensuring its full compliance with the Paris principles. Second, design a comprehensive national framework to address emerging social challenges, including with regard to the protection of youth from the dangers of drugs and school dropout. We'd like to wish Seychelles every success in this UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Mauritius through video.
Thank you, Chair. Mauritius extends a very warm welcome to the delegation of the brotherly country of Seychelles during this fourth cycle of the UPR. Mauritius commends Seychelles for its efforts towards the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, including towards the most vulnerable. We acknowledge the leading role human trafficking in the Indian Ocean region. In a constructive and brotherly spirit, Mauritius recommends that Seychelles continues its efforts towards the accreditation of the National Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris principles. We wish Seychelles a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to Mexico.
As well as the adoption of the National Diaspora Policy 2024-2029. Constructively and respectfully.